What is up, yo? This is Gift speaking. Welcome to it. You are on the Gift Effects, and today we are stretching things out of proportion. Slightly. Really cool trick if you ask me, and it comes in handy in those moments where you want to be creative with your text but don't want to use the traditional way of animating text like rotation, scale, opacity, blah blah blah. So you have a little bit more control over your animation. You can stretch your text as high as you want, you can stretch it as wide as you want, as long as it makes sense and it looks like it was done intentionally. So how exactly does one go about stretching text like that, you ask?
Well, smack my ass and call me Judy.
Because we're about to jump in. Keep your legs straight.
I kept my legs straight, Spike.
So here we are in After Effects, and the first thing I want to do when I get here obviously is to create a new composition. I'm going to make sure that my composition is around full frame, and I'm going to make it maybe 6 seconds. All right, cool. And then I'm going to title my composition and call it something like that. Cool. So now that I have my composition, right, the first thing I want to do is to make sure that my text has some kind of background to sit against. So I'm going to left click in my layers panel here, and under the new drop down menu, I'm going to go click on solid, right? So that should create a new pop-up box, and I'm going to call that BG for background, and I'm going to make my color black. And click OK, cool. So now we're sorted. The first thing I want to do as well here, before anything, is to create my text that I'm gonna animate. So I'm gonna click on the text tool here, and I'm gonna type out my text and call it hero, right? Gonna find my alignment tools so I can get my text kind of nice and centered. And then I'm going to change my font to something like Poppins. Yeah, I'm going to go something like bold, and then obviously I'm going to change that to white. Cool. So I know for certain that my text is nice and centered. Just going to make sure once more. And then yeah, so I like to have my anchor point at the bottom. Here, you can have yours at the center if you want. It doesn't really make a difference for this effect. I just prefer to have mine at the bottom just in case I need to animate it later on, and I prefer animating things from the bottom or having my anchor point at the bottom when I animate my text. It just gives me a lot more control over what I want to see, right? So the essence of this effect, right, it relies heavily on turning your text into shapes. So if you're familiar with Illustrator, there's a technique in there that we use, and we kind of create text and then we turn it into curves. So if you're familiar with that technique, it's kind of the same thing in After Effects. Essentially what you do is you turn your text into curves, and then into shapes rather, in After Effects, and then that'll give you more control over the points of your text, like how much it'll give you just more control over your text if in case maybe you want to extend the height or the width, just whatever you want to do basically with your text. Converting them into shapes in After Effects will give you more control over your text. So for us to do that, I just have to right click on my text and then go under create, and then there should be an option there that says create shapes from text. So if you click on that, you'll see that in your composition, your selection layer will change color from red to blue, and also in your layers panel, you'll see that automatically a new layer has been created from your text, and your now former text layer has been kind of hidden from the composition, and implying that your selection now is on the shape layer that has been created from your text layer, right? So this is where the bulk of the effect is going to be. It's going to be on this shape layer, right, which is created from your text layer. So if you drop down on this little shape layer, you'll see there's contents and there's transform there. So if you go under transform, you'll see that all of the letters that make up your text in your composition has kind of been laid out for you into different layers, so to speak, right? And that is to give you more control over each letter. For example, if I drop down under H, you'll see there's a path specifically for that letter that has kind of been dedicated to that one layer, where you will be able to manipulate all the points of that letter, right? And if we just do a little exploring here, you'll see that under R, there are 2 letters instead of 1. Under H we have 1, but under R we have 2. So the reason that is because After Effects recognizes the letter R as a letter that's kind of been made up of 2 path layers, right? What that means is that if I zoom in here, for example, you can see that the outer part of the letter has kind of been highlighted because I'm selecting the first R here that's under the R path, right? If I select the second one, you'll see that it selects the inner layer on the same letter. So it's gonna be the same thing for the O as well, and that is because of the 2 paths that make up that one letter, right? So something like E will have 1 path because of it's just an outer path that doesn't need any internal paths or anything like that. So same with the H. That's the reason why here we only have 1 path layer. So essentially this is what you're going to be kind of like keyframing all throughout. And you can see that if I select the aria, for example, and I try to pull 1 point, you'll see that it affects how your letters look in the composition because of the changes that you're making by selecting that path layer, right? So same with the R. If I select the R, it's going to select the outer part because I'm selecting this first R here. So that's if I want to make changes to the outer part, right, of that R. And if I select the inward one, it will select the inside path, and then it will allow me to make changes to that specific path layer, right? So if I just quickly, oh, and another thing that's worth mentioning is that this is the long way of going about like finding paths in your text. So if you don't want to go this route, which is the long way around it actually, all you have to do then is to come up here at this little search bar, and you can search for the term paths, and then or maybe just path, and then all the paths that make up your text will appear for you, and all you have to do is kind of like keyframe them and then move those keyframes if you want to see the change that is kind of affected over that time frame. You can start moving things around so that you can see how your changes are affecting your paths. Like for example, if I move this now forward in time, it should go back, it should restore everything to this messed up look that we have in the composition. So over time, it means this change will be happening between 8 frames and 0 frame, right? So that's what's going to be happening. So this is how essentially we create the effect. This is the basic approach to stretching your font if you want to do that in After Effects. So we can then just go just get creative with how we want to animate the text, because then we can manipulate each point and get it to do whatever we want to do, or get it to behave in such a way that we want it to create the animation that we want to see, right? So yeah, so now that we've covered the basic approach of how we can stretch the text and how we can create shapes from text, I'm gonna get rid of these, right? And then I'm going to start afresh with my new copy, and I'm going to call it hero, right? Same as before. And then I'm going to go into my alignment tools and kind of get my text centered a bit. And again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create my shapes from text, right? So essentially another layer will be created for me just as before. And then now I can go into you can search there if you want, and then just create keyframes and then move them to 1 second. So how this effect works, right? You need to have your final look as the keyframed look. So everything that happens before that 1 second or before that time value that you want your look to be on, for example, whatever your final frame is, you need to keep in mind that all the changes that you need to make will come before that frame, right? So for example, at 0 seconds, I want to stretch the H out, and then I'm gonna go ahead and stretch the E out, right? And I'm just using shift and the arrows to make these stretches. Obviously I just select the R as well, and then I'm gonna stretch that out until it's kind of like there. Oh, good. So now you'll see, just as we had before, if I move to this time frame, my text will be as it was when I first typed it out, and it's what I want to see at the end of my time frame when the whole animation is done, right? So that's the first introduction of how I want to introduce my text. So I think it's worth mentioning as well that if you want to make any changes to your paths, you have to, like for example, if you want to make changes to the O, or you want to stretch the O out, for example, you might have to select everything that comes before the O. So you can stretch the O out, not just alone, but with everything that comes before it. Okay, so, and the reason for that is because I'm just gonna illustrate an example here where you'll see that if I try to kind of select the O alone and I kind of stretch it out, it begins to overlap over all the other text, which is not what we want, right? So basically that's what I wanted you to know about this effect. And yeah, and so now we can go ahead with animating our text and seeing what we want to create can look like. So overall, this is how the effect is created, whether you want to introduce new text in the frame, or if you want to stretch each font on its own, or if you want to stretch an entire word to introduce to your composition, right? So now let's see how creative we can get with the knowledge we have about turning text into shapes and using paths to manipulate those single text layers.
The effect isn't limited to what we've covered in the video. You can also create other interesting motions by controlling your text points. It's really up to you what you want to do, how far you want to take it. The possibilities are endless. Now with all of that said, that is me for the day. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something new, and if you haven't already, do leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Peace out.